There's something different about the way a man speaks when he's no longer hiding. And when King Charles stood before the world, stooped slightly, eyes heavy, words raw, it wasn't the polished monarch people had come to expect. It was a father, a husband, a man carrying the weight of decades-long silence. What triggered that moment wasn't some political storm or tabloid headline. It was a private remark tossed out casually by Queen Camilla at a closed-door event that pierced through the royal image and cracked it wide open. Now, let's back up for a second. The royal family has always played chess while the world plays checkers. Everything is planned, curated, designed to keep the illusion of unity. But that night at Clarence House, the mask slipped. Wine was flowing, laughter echoed through gilded halls, and then Camilla, so often quiet and composed, let loose a comment that would flip the entire royal dynamic. Well, we all know she wasn't exactly stable, was she? She reportedly said about Princess Diana. Not a shout, not a scandalous accusation, just a cruel, offhand dismissal soaked in years of unspoken contempt. The people in that room froze. A few left early, no one defended her. But the damage was done, not in public, not yet, but in the quiet chain of whispers that reached William and Harry like a dagger wrapped in silk. For William, the words weren't shocking, they were confirming. He'd always sensed the undercurrent of disrespect toward his mother, but this time someone had the nerve to write it down. For Harry, it was gasoline on an already raging fire. In California, half a world away, he read the quote and knew immediately it wasn't fiction. It was exactly who Camilla had always been to him. For both brothers, it wasn't about one comment. It was about a legacy, constantly rewritten by those who'd tried to erase the truth. And here's where it gets wild. These two men, who hadn't been in sync for years, suddenly aligned without a second thought. No PR meetings, no spin, just a quiet, unshakable fury. This wasn't politics, this was blood. Behind palace walls, Charles felt it. The air got thinner, the rooms quieter. His sons were no longer tolerating Camilla's presence. They were confronting it. And the king, now older, now wearier, realized something he hadn't faced in decades. Diana wasn't gone. Not really. Her memory had shape, volume, and two sons who refused to let it be mocked. Charles read the reports, saw his sons' silence, heard their demands, not through official memos, but in the absence of warmth. They didn't need to yell. Their quiet refusal to play along said everything. The old royal tactic, burying it, waiting it out, wouldn't work this time. There was no elegant solution, no statement vague enough to make it go away. He poured himself a drink. He didn't speak to Camilla, not that night. Instead, he did something no king had done before. He wrote 2 letters, one for William, one for Harry, not as a monarch, as a father. No royal seal, no advisors, just handwriting that trembled at the edges. And when the palace staff was called in the next day to prepare a public statement, they were stunned. Charles wasn't asking for edits, he wasn't looking for ways to soften the blow. He wanted the truth to stand. He wanted the world to know that for all the years he tried to hold the monarchy together, he had let something vital fall apart, his relationship with the sons of Diana, and that was something he could no longer ignore. When the statement dropped, it was like Buckingham Palace had been hit by lightning. The official royal family page posted it at exactly 5:00 p.m. London time, no fanfare, no advance leaks, just a stark message sitting beneath the royal crest. A personal apology from King Charles to William and Harry. Not on behalf of the crown, not as a diplomatic maneuver, but as a father who had stayed silent for too long. He didn't try to dress it up. No fluffy language, no carefully planted subtext. It was raw. To William and Harry, I am sorry. It read, I have failed in protecting the peace that should have always surrounded your mother's legacy. He acknowledged that recent remarks had caused deep pain and that for years he had avoided confronting it, but not anymore. Across the world, screens lit up. News anchors paused mid-sentence. Social media didn't just react, it's exploded. For a generation raised on images of Diana smiling through heartbreak, chased by paparazzi, trapped by royal expectation, This was vindication. Finally, someone inside the palace said what everyone else had always known. She wasn't crazy, she was betrayed. And her sons had carried that betrayal in silence until it cracked open the gates of the palace itself. Outside Kensington Palace, people began to gather. Some brought flowers, others held candles. But it wasn't mourning, it was something different. A sense of relief, like history had finally been corrected, even if just a little. There were signs taped to the gates. We believed her, justice for Diana, and one handwritten note that said, "Thank you, Charles. You may have been late, but at least you arrived." Inside the palace, reactions were mixed. Some senior aides were panicked. This kind of vulnerability wasn't protocol. The monarchy wasn't built to be emotional, it was built to endure. But younger staffers saw something else. Humanity. For once, the crown didn't feel like a machine. It felt like a man trying to make peace with the ghosts of his past. Camilla, meanwhile, vanished. No statements, no subtle appearances in the background of royal engagements, no damage control interviews, just absence. Her team canceled upcoming events quietly, photographers were given nothing to shoot, and behind the scenes, Clarence House was silent. Staff members tiptoed through corridors they once strolled confidently. The Queen Consort wasn't speaking to anyone, not publicly, not privately. Her usual grace had been replaced by distance. Some thought it was shame, others whispered about pride, but those closest to her knew better. It was fear, not of the press or the internet or even public opinion, but of something far deeper, being cast as the villain in a story that wasn't hers to narrate. She read the king's apology 3 times in her private suite. When she finally set the paper down, her hands were shaking. "Do it's her again," she whispered. "Always her." She wasn't wrong. Diana's name had eclipsed hers once more, and this time, it wasn't because of a public comparison. It was because of a private truth that had finally surfaced. And now, the carefully rebuilt image Camilla had worked on for 20 years was crumbling under the weight of one careless remark. The staff noticed the shift. Meals were now taken alone. Her dogs, once lively, always in tow, seemed subdued, confused. She stopped asking for updates. She avoided the West Wing, where most family conversations were happening. The Queen Consort was still in the palace, but it was as if she had already left. A woman once at the heart of power now found herself completely isolated, not by scandal, but by silence. Forgiveness doesn't arrive with a press release. It lives in the small, unspoken moments, and after the apology, the monarchy's future began to hinge on moments like that. Quiet looks, subtle shifts, doors left open instead of closed. The public saw the statement, but what they didn't see was what came next. Not the pageantry, not the balcony waves. What followed was something far more delicate. Healing, or at least the attempt. At a charity event in London, Prince William arrived early. No entourage, no press filter, just a simple suit and a quiet demeanor. He stood beside his father for the first time since everything broke. The two didn't exchange dramatic words, but they didn't need to. The moment spoke for itself. William's presence wasn't approval, but it was acknowledgement, a way of saying, "I'm here and I heard you." For a royal family built on distance, that was monumental. Across the ocean, Harry said nothing publicly. No interviews, no statements. But Meghan appeared at an LA fundraiser days later wearing a bracelet Diana once gifted her. It wasn't flashy or staged, it was a message, and people noticed. The headlines shifted. The conversation moved. It wasn't about Camilla anymore, it was about Diana, about memory, legacy, and 2 sons reclaiming the story that had never truly been theirs to tell. Inside palace walls, things changed too. Charles started taking longer walks in the garden, alone, less as a king, more as a man who had been reminded of the difference between leadership and love. He met with fewer advisors, he took more handwritten notes. Staff described him as quieter, but more focused, like someone who had finally dropped an invisible weight. The apology had cost him something, yes, but it had also given him back a piece of what he lost when Dionback died, his son's eyes. Camilla remained behind closed doors. Her future was uncertain. There were no formal talks of abdication. But there were shifts. Rooms she once dominated now fell silent when she entered. Her name wasn't scrubbed from the schedule, but it was faded. Events she once headlined were now under review. She still sat beside Charles at formal engagements, but their interactions were stiff, no side glances, no quiet touches, just presence hollow and rehearsed. For the public, reactions were split. Some believed the apology marked a turning point, a human act that finally showed accountability. Others weren't so forgiving. You can't just say sorry and expect it to be over, one woman said on a BBC call-in show. He protected Camilla for decades while Diana's name was picked apart, and yet even those skeptical voices admitted one thing: something had changed. The monarchy had flinched, and once you show your humanity, people stop seeing you as untouchable. The younger generation saw something else. They saw two brothers, once at war, finding their way back through shared pain. They saw a king who stopped hiding behind scripted statements. They saw a woman confronted by the reality that time doesn't erase harm, it just delays its return. For William and Harry, this wasn't closure, but it was something close to clarity. The woman who shaped their childhood, who shielded them and was shattered in the process, had finally been defended, not by a PR machine, not by a biographer, but by the one man who should have done it all along. What comes next for the monarchy is uncertain, but one thing is clear: Diana's voice is no longer a ghost in the hallways, it's a presence in every room, not as a shadow, but as a reminder that truth once spoken can't be ignored, and legacy once claimed doesn't fade. It grows stronger when it's finally protected by the ones who carry it.